For those of you who don't know me, I am Jim Marshall, the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Today, we're going to discuss some of the content of that book. This is the scale of belief. So let's talk about belief. Personally, I'm not big on belief. If you actually observe people closely, which I spent most of my life doing, you'll see that more than 90% of the time, when people get in trouble, it's because of belief. Look at Hitler's beliefs. How much trouble did that cause?
You also call this a scale of faith.
Yes, faith and belief are pretty much the same thing. This is not necessarily a good thing. It's just something that exists. Personally, what I have learned is that belief is only necessary when knowledge is absent. And that drove me through my life and still does to accrue more and more knowledge. So I don't have to rely on belief. You look at a political debate. Party A says this, party A says that. Rather than believing either one of them, I just go and get the facts. One guy says, when I took office, inflation was 9. The other guy says, no, it wasn't, it was 1.4. I just look it up. Oh, there it is, 1.4. Okay, I don't have to believe anything. That's why I'm a polymathic intellectual, because even in religion, in my spiritual state, belief is not something that is much of a part of my life, and I worked very hard to get to, because for me, belief is always a substitute for knowledge in general. And I am a sponge for information and certitude. It's not enough for me to know about something. I have to actually know the thing. For example, I don't know much about horses. I know that I like them. I know how to ride them. But equestrians and breeders, they know 100 times more about horses than I do. So I'm perfectly okay with saying I don't know. That's something that most people have trouble with.
And as I understand, this was one of the last scales to surface.
That's right.
It's quite unusual in its structure.
Yes.
You can provide clarity and purpose and certainty with belief, but it can also manifest as stubbornness and rejection of contradictory evidence.
That's right. Henry Ford famously said, this is often quoted by people, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. I see people do this all the time. I'm always trying to get my clients to see what's in front of your face. Inspect. Don't just assume. Don't just say, oh, women don't like me. There's no point trying to get a date. No, you don't know. There might be some woman around the corner who you're just right for her. You don't know that. See, that's a belief. It's inspection before the fact, which is something I don't do. I actually look at the thing. And if I don't know, I don't know. What most people do is they can't tolerate not knowing. So instead, they put a belief there. If you study world history, as I have, you'll see that most of the problems came from belief. The Crusades, what were the Crusades about? That was all driven by belief. You had thousands of people slaughtering for hundreds of years. For what? Or the Inquisition. They burnt people alive because they espoused a different belief. Oh, your belief is not the same as our belief, so you're a heretic, so we're going to burn you alive. That's pretty nasty stuff. Terrorists. Why do terrorists, whether it's the Irish Republican Army or ISIS or any one of these other groups, it's all driven by belief. So that's my disclaimer on the subject of belief. Now, this is a very garden variety scale in the sense that it's a linear scale, which means there's no apparent congruence between 1 and 7. This doesn't go in a spiral, it just goes in a straight line. It's gradual, meaning there's an infinitude of gradations between each of the levels. You move gradually, which is what most people expect. And it's specific, meaning it has a context. So what is your belief regarding spirituality? What is your belief regarding your wife? What is your belief regarding your profession and so forth? I've been just watching people, and this continues to this day, just wrap themselves around a telephone like a crashed car on belief. I had 15 years of Catholic education, and I'm an expert in Christianity, which is part of my theological training. And I've had people refuse to work with me because they thought I wasn't a Christian. I've also had people criticize me because I was a Christian. Either way, it's all about belief. I don't do that. Bigotry, what is bigotry? All these fixed ideas people have. Oh, you can't trust women. That's a belief. We're talking about my mother, your girlfriend. In other words, it's a vast generality, and it is a barrier to success. There are true facts, like the acceleration of gravity near the surface of the Earth is 32 feet per second. And you don't have to take my word. You can go out and calculate it yourself. But that's got nothing to do with belief. That's a calculation.
It's interesting with belief. It can profoundly shape brain activity and neurochemistry and physiological responses. Belief and faith tend to activate reward and meaning-making pathways. Skepticism and disbelief engage analytical and threat systems. The extremes on either end of the spectrum can dysregulate the stress response systems and potentially lead to negative health outcomes.
That's why I say in the chapter on the scale of belief that neutrality is probably the safest place to be, because level 4 neutrality is impartiality. As I point out in the book, everybody enters this scale at level 4. When you come to something new, like when I was a sophomore in college, I sat next to a girl and she was very friendly. It turned out she was a Buddhist. I don't know anything about Buddhism. This was New York many decades ago. There weren't any Buddhists around that I know of. I never met a Buddhist. I was entering at neutrality. She said, you know anything about Buddhism? I said, no. I entered level 4. And then she introduced me to it, and I moved on this scale. My level of belief moved a little bit. And that's typically what happens with people. They come into the situation neutral, and then they're ready to go up the scale or down the scale. It's very difficult for most people to stay at neutrality. Now, one of the reasons that I've been meditating for 40 years on a daily basis is to do that, to stay at neutrality. And the result is I don't react. It doesn't really matter what the guy says. I'm not going to react, because the reaction is a departure from neutrality. People get in fights, in fist fights, as guys mainly, like in a bar. Who are you going to vote for? I'm going to vote for Trump. Trump's a bum. Oh, yeah, Biden's worse. And they were in a fist fight. That would never happen to me. First of all, I wouldn't tell them who I was going to vote for. And in the second place, no matter what he said, I would say, okay. And again, my father wisely taught me, I guess starting when I was about 10, never discuss religion and politics. I realized that because it's based on belief. I do not believe or disbelieve much of anything. People often ask me what I believe, and my genuine response is, I neither believe nor disbelieve. And the reason for that is, in most cases, you don't really need to believe or disbelieve. Somebody says, do you believe Biden is going to be reelected? I don't have an answer for that. I don't believe it. I don't disbelieve. Or do you believe the worst president was James Buchanan? I don't believe it. I don't disbelieve. I've read a lot about James Buchanan. He's often rated as the worst president, but I don't have a belief about it. That's one of the reasons why I am equally at home in many different religions. My philosophy of life is not no, but it's yes, and. If somebody says, do you know Hinduism? I don't say, no, I'm a Christian. I say, yes, and I know about Buddhism, I know about Jainism, I know about Christianity, I know about Islam. So the knowledge supplants belief. I don't have any belief. I know certain things. If somebody says to me, do you believe in angels? I say, no. I've had experiences with angels. I've talked to them, can see them, but I have no beliefs about them. They're just left dumbfounded. See, it has nothing to do with belief. If you know how to do it telepathically, you can communicate with angels. It's not that hard. It has nothing to do with belief. People have belief because they lack knowledge. What are we measuring in this scale? As an engineer, this is very important to me. In any scale, what are you measuring? What is this a scale of? Now, it's called a scale of belief. What is the substance of this function that we have here? The vertical dotted line goes from above level 1, complete trust and control, down to below level 7, no trust or control. Think of it this way. My son tells me something. What'd you do with the last $50 I gave you? I had to use it to fix my car. I believe him because I have complete trust. And there's control both ways between us. He controls me and I control him. That's what you want in a relationship. But there are people who tell me things who I have no trust or control. In other words, there's no control either way. I've known people who are at this scale, they're just daffy at disbelief. They're just daffy people. And you can't trust anything they say. And you can't control them, and they can't control you. The wife can control the husband, and the husband can control the wife because there's trust there. The husband comes home late, the wife says, gee, you're 15 minutes late. And he says, yeah, I had a lot of traffic. She believes him, level one. Why? Because she trusts him, and she's controlling him by asking him, and he's controlling her by answering. So think about this. You ask a person a question, and they don't answer you. That's a very bad sign. They're saying they don't trust you, and they're not going to let you control them. This is something that I take very seriously in talking to people. They don't answer your questions. Now, there is such thing as an intrusive question. I don't ask people how much do you have in the bank, but I might ask something like, do you have a religious preference? It's a yes or no question. And then I might say, is that something you want to discuss? No. So you see, there's a lack of control there. They're not letting me control them. And they are, in a sense, trying to control me by not telling me. So you see, trust and control are interwoven. You can never separate trust and control. And the reason why relationships deteriorate or decay is because there's a lack of trust and control. So the husband comes home, the wife says, Smith's coming over for bridge, go put on a clean shirt. The husband says, okay. She's controlling him, isn't she? You know why he does that? He trusts her. He figures, okay, if she thinks his shirt doesn't look too good, fine, I'll put on another one. He's willing to be controlled by her, and she's willing to control him. There's trust between them. For example, in the United States, you have about a third of the people on one side who do not believe anything said by the people on the other side. And then you have a corresponding 33% on the opposite side who don't believe anything said by the person from the other side. So you have two mutually exclusive groups of people. They do not believe anything that is said. So they don't communicate. They're not going to control one another. There's no interface there. When you get somebody who's in the middle who tries to bridge this, he gets attacked. For example, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is running for president, he is what I would call a fair-minded person. He's very smart. He's very knowledgeable. He's very sensible. He'll say something about Trump. He gets attacked. But if you actually listen to what he says, he's not really telling you a belief. He's telling you what he knows, which is a different thing. This is a very big and explosive and dangerous subject because everybody says, oh, the problem is ignorance. Yes, ignorance is pandemic. We have a huge problem with ignorance, but there's a worse problem than ignorance. So you have people in the KKK, they believe that blacks are inferior. You can't talk them out of that. That's their belief. It doesn't happen too much now, but they lynched a lot of black people.
Do you think someone can maintain a healthy balance or relationship between belief and realism?
That depends on what you mean by belief and what you mean by realism, because that's why it's important to notice that there are 7 levels of belief. So confidence is great faith, but it's not complete faith, which is belief. See, the truth is, having been involved in education continuously since the age of 3, belief is a barrier to learning. So you have somebody who believes the world is 6,000 years old, because if you read the Bible and calculate, that's what comes out to being 6,000 years old, and that's their belief. And I might say we have carbon dating, which is a scientific process that anybody can learn, that proves we have rocks that are 50,000 years old, 100,000 years old, 200,000 years old. They don't want to hear it. They're going to believe the world is 6,000 years old. Now, frankly, that's a fairly innocuous belief. But having a belief like Hitler's belief that Germany's problems were caused by the Jews, that's a pernicious belief. We're going to get rid of them all, the final solution. That's why you get the terrorists who attacked Israel on October 7th, all driven by belief. The Jews are bad, they have to be exterminated. And these Islamic radicals, Islam is the only true faith. If you do not embrace it, we have a right to wipe you out. So that's all about belief. That's different from confidence. Confidence is not as extreme. When you say belief, what do you mean by belief? I try to maintain a posture of neutrality most of the time. The result of that is I don't really have beliefs. Like people say, what's your favorite color? I have to say, I don't have a favorite color. There's lots of colors, there's hundreds of different colors, and I can like any of them. Some of them I think go better with others, but I have a favorite. Oh, what's your favorite fruit? I don't really have a favorite fruit. Now, if you ask, do you like avocados? No. Isn't that a belief? No, because I've eaten avocados and I know what they're like, and they're repellent to me.
The preference.
Yeah, you could call it that. A preference is a very innocuous word. It doesn't really go into belief at all. But yeah, it's a preference. In other words, I'm not saying I dislike avocados because there's a belief about them. I've eaten them enough to say, I don't want any more of these. I'm the kind of guy who will try something and then I'll make a decision. Yeah, this is not something I want to eat again. That's knowledge. That's not belief. That's where Septemics came from. It came from a person who's joined at the hip with knowledge and who doesn't pay attention to belief. Belief is how you get in trouble. Now, disbelief is crazy. That's why it's at the bottom of the scale. This person has no faith. Now, think about this. When you take your car out on the road, traffic going in both directions, you have some faith in the other drivers that they're not going to crash into you and kill you. So take some faith. This is where you get into people who are really timid, fearful of everything. Oh, I don't want to go outside. A mosquito might bite me. I don't want to go for a walk. I might come across a snake. So somebody who's that fearful is going to have difficulty functioning. He has no trust in himself.
We can see it in the 21st century, whereby in level 7, I see there's outright denial of scientific consensus. There's rejection of established historical facts and promotion of conspiracy beliefs. There's a complete lack of faith in certain authorities, experts, or societal pillars. There's also a refusal to believe in the viability of potential solutions to major challenges. There's complete disbelief. There's no faith at all. And those levels manifest in politics, business, culture, and technology, and they shape mindsets. They drive behavior. They entrench people. I know what you're saying about impartiality and neutrality. When I looked at this scale, I drew as a triangle. And at the apex of the triangle, I put neutral. And at the bottom, I put positive and negative. It's just very simple. But if I'm standing in impartiality, neutrality, I can see both sides of things. So if two people are arguing positive and negative charge, if I'm standing at the apex of the triangle, I don't think about what they're arguing, or I don't lean either way, but I can see both sides of the argument because I'm at that position.
Yeah, that is what rhetoric is about. That is what debate is about. You can debate any side. Any good lawyer can take either side of the case and argue it equally well, because it's not about belief. He has a job. He's advocating for a position. He's getting paid for that. And his job is to advocate for this position. It has nothing to do with what he believes or not. If you get an attorney who gets belief mixed in it, that's going to hurt his practice. That's going to be like, I don't want to have the KKK for a client. The American Nazi Party brought a famous lawsuit. They were represented by the American Civil Liberties Union. The American Civil Liberties Union is at the opposite extreme from the Nazi Party. But the point was, do these people have a right to have a parade and present their speech in a nonviolent way under the Constitution? They do. So there was this famous case where the ACLU represented the Nazi Party, even though ACLU lawyers are the last people in the world who are ever going to be Nazis. So that's what a good lawyer does. One of the reasons that I've always done well in court is that I don't bring any emotion in there with me. These are the facts, this is the law, and that's what the judge wants to hear. He wants to hear the facts and he wants to hear the law. He doesn't want to hear you're mad, this guy's a bum, or anything else. Judges don't like that. It doesn't help them. I'm talking about good judges. There are judges themselves who bring belief into the courtroom, and that is tyranny. That's what's called a show trial, which happens in totalitarian countries. I knew somebody who was at disbelief, and this was a family member, and there was really no getting away from this person. I actually paid close attention to what this person said, because this person was so consistently wrong about everything. I listened, and I pretty much knew that whatever position this person took, was diametrically opposite to the right position. If this person said, oh, don't vote for that guy, right away, I would find out about that guy and see if I should vote for him, and probably would. Because the person at disbelief, they're allergic to facts. You would try to reason with this person and present the facts. This is what happened. This person was arrested and charged with this, and then was convicted with this. They're at disbelief. Until you actually deal with a person like this, it's hard to imagine, because it's like you're dealing with a crazy person. This person does not trust what you say. They can't control much of anything. If you go out with your car, you're controlling your car. You have to have some trust. You trust that the brakes are going to work when you step on them. You pass thousands of drivers, you trust that they're not going to come over the yellow line and run into you, and so forth and so on.
Psychologically, it's closed-mindedness, it's intolerance of ambiguity, it's dismissal of potential valid information. Factors like strong prior beliefs and cognitive rigidity and the need for closure contributes to this factor at level 7.
I would say that cognitive rigidity is another way of saying belief. That is what a belief is. A belief is a cognitive rigidity. This guy says that Christianity is the only way to save your soul. Okay, that's his belief. You can't talk him out of it. That's at the opposite extreme from disbelief. Now, interestingly enough, often a person who has a strong belief will have a disbelief that corresponds to it. So the person who is a rabid adherent of some religion will disbelieve all the other religions. I have often been in the position of trying to get people to see that other religions say the same thing that this religion says. They do not want to hear it. For example, if you talk to Christians about reincarnation, again, I'm not promoting reincarnation. I don't believe and I don't disbelieve. They say, oh, reincarnation, no, that's not part of Christianity. They don't want to hear it. So most of the people in the world believe in reincarnation. They don't want to hear about that. It has no effect on them. That's cognitive rigidity. I'll actually read it from the Bible. Jesus said, who do the people say that I am? Somebody says, many think that you're Elijah reincarnated, the great prophet Elijah, a brilliant prophet who I've read. They thought Jesus had come back as Elijah. That's reincarnation in Christianity. Jesus doesn't say, get away from me, you're crazy or you're an idiot. He just goes on with, who do they say that I am? So getting people to accept, for example, I know a guy who is a radical, rabid, conservative Republican. And I know some Democrats who are very smart, very nice people. Now, these are not usually the rabid ones, because I stay away from rabid people of any extreme. And I'll try to say, this guy, if you listen to what he says, it's quite reasonable. You can have a conversation with, for example, when Bernie Sanders was running for president, he's an avowed socialist. He's an open socialist, right? I listened to him. He didn't bother me. I wasn't offended by anything he said. He didn't irritate me. He seemed like a smart man, and I didn't vote for him, but still, I can listen to him. I can also listen to Ted Cruz, who's a conservative Republican, and listen to what he has to say. Again, I don't believe anything that any of these people say. I just listen to the good ones, the smart ones. They cite facts, and you can verify these facts because you can accept facts from a position of neutrality, and that is what I advocate. From disbelief, we come up to cynicism. Cynicism is very little faith. So this is a person who is cynical about it. All these politicians are only out for themselves. Very little faith. That's cynical. And I would say to somebody like that, you're right about many of them, but there are some who are genuine in trying to promote an agenda that they think is appropriate. And they're not really out for themselves, although they're all out themselves. See, that's cynicism. Then up from that is skepticism.
The literature shows psychologically with cynicism, it leads to chronic activation of the brain's threat detection and negative emotion processing regions that potentially can contribute to anxiety and depression and other mental health issues. Additionally, it also suppresses regions associated with trust, empathy, and social cognition. It can dysregulate the stress response systems, which then lead to inflammation and immune system suppression and other negative health outcomes. But there's the fact of missed opportunities, which I would call it a cynicism distortion, because the pervasive cynicism, looking at the physiological data, that leads to a negative emotion that can lead to strained relationships, cynicism, distortion, or missed
Right.
opportunities. I see it as a defense mechanism. And sometimes you see it where people can develop a superiority act, but they actually have an inferiority complex.
That's right. The Greeks invented the word cynic. It means dog, the Greek word for dog. There were some people in Athens 2,600 years ago who were cynics. In other words, they dismissed everything. They were nihilistic. And so the people said, these people are like dogs. They eat and they sleep and they bark. That's where the word cynic comes from. So in other words, they were saying, they're not even really humans, more like dogs than humans. That's where the word cynicism originally came from. The strict definition of it is the belief that the only motivation is benefit to oneself. That is, strictly speaking, what philosophically what cynicism means, that there is no other motivation other than improving one's own position. And you find this splattered around in a variety of philosophical areas. And that's just factually untrue. I knew a lot of people in my life who gave their lives up to serve others. I studied with the Society of Jesus for 4 years. Those men take vows of poverty chastity. They don't even own their own underwear. All these are brilliant men because that's who goes into. My algebra teacher was an engineer. He gave up his career as an engineer to teach 13-year-old kids like me how to do algebra. It's a big step down. Now, that person wasn't out for his own benefit. He was there to serve. And I knew the Jesuits very well over a 4-year period. That's who they were. That's why they joined that group. And I'm singling them out because I know them personally, but that's true for Buddhist monks and Hindu yogis and all kinds of spiritually motivated people. They're trying to promote something they think is beneficial to people, like Mother Teresa went around helping people her whole life. Needless to say, my disclaimer is that there are always people embedded in all of these organizations who don't belong there, who are there for the wrong reason. And I've known plenty of those too. I've known some Christian clergy who are quite destructive. They were people who had personality disorders and so forth. So I'm not endorsing all of those people. I'm just saying that every person in the world has the same motivation is just factually wrong. It's like saying every rock is the same color. So now skepticism, that's where a person, he has a little bit of faith. For example, I had a client many years ago who was actually a libertarian candidate for political office. I didn't know anything about libertarianism. This is many decades ago. So I meet this guy, says, you know anything about libertarianism? I said, no. I said, oh yeah, I'm running for office. So I was at Neutrality. So when he tells me this, I'm a little bit skeptical. There's this political party. It's not one of the two major parties. I grew to an educated adult without hearing about it. So, there's a little bit of skepticism. This propelled me into, I'm going to find out about this, read about it, talk to people about it, listen to people talk. This guy was a very reasonable person, very intelligent, sensible person, was my reading of him. Of course, I was a little bit skeptical at first, and then learned about it. Again, I have no belief about it, but I know a lot about it. I know what they think, I know what they propound. So then when the skepticism is overcome, you come back to neutrality, where you started in the first place, which is impartiality, which is where you want a judge to be, where you want a policeman to be, where you want people in government to be. Now, if you listen to congressional hearings, Senate hearings, which I do often, you'll see that you almost never have a member of Congress who's neutral. They come to that hearing with an agenda. They have an axe to grind. They couch it in legal terms because most of them are lawyers. Almost all of them are lawyers. And they know how to sound neutral. But if you really pay attention, some of them don't even bother to do that. They just attack. But that's really what you want. You want somebody who comes to it with an open mind. A clinical psychologist comes to the client neutral. That's what he's supposed to do. He's not supposed to say, I don't like this guy because his name ends in a vowel. Or I don't like this guy because his skin is too dark. Or I don't like this guy because he has a yarmulke on. That's not neutrality. You accept the patient, you listen to what he says. See, there's some trust there. You're trusting him enough to tell you something sensible and meaningful. Then there's control, because he's controlling you by telling you what's bothering him, and you're controlling him by giving him feedback. See, trust and control.
One of the things with maintaining neutrality or true neutrality is it can be metabolically demanding. It requires you to actively suppress innate biases and emotional responses. So it may engage areas of the brain associated with cognitive control, attention, emotional regulation.
Right.
So sustained impartiality can be taxing for
Oh,
many
yeah.
people who have this innate bias.
I can tell you, I've had some clients. I dealt with, as a human development engineer, hundreds of clients, every description. And so I came to it with neutrality. I listened to what they said, and I did my engineering processes on them that helped them. But some of them, not many, but some of them were so irksome that it was stressful. It was hard for me to stay impartial. This never reached the point where I actually said or did anything about it, but I would feel something about it, which is not true neutrality. Most of the time, I didn't feel anything at all. I just listened and handled the session to help my client. But once in a while, you get one who's really irksome. As you said, it's stressful.
They have innate tendencies towards belief perseverance and confirmation bias.
Yes. So then, if you go up from neutrality, you come genuousness. It means much faith. You're not just neutral, you have much faith in this thing. See? So a young, naive person comes to you and you tell him something, says, really? Oh, I see. See, there's ingenuousness there. Now, this is a person who can be taken to the cleaners. You see, this quarter that I have, this quarter is worth $10,000 because look at it, see? And you say, really? But I'll give it to you for only 500 because I'm short. Would you do that? See, that's ingenuousness. So that's having faith in somebody that you shouldn't have faith in. I'm sure you've done business with people who wound up screwing you. You trusted them. I had an associate once. I hired him to do a job. I gave him a large sum of money. Never saw the guy again, ever. Eventually, I got a lawyer. I filed a lawsuit against the guy. He did the usual tap dance, but eventually he gave me back my money because I had an open and shut case. I took him at his faith because he was recommended to me and was successful in his area. He had credentials, and I showed ingenuousness toward him, enough to trust him with a lot of money, and he screwed me. Billy Joel had his brother-in-law managing his career. Billy Joel's brother stole $1 million from Billy Joel. This is common knowledge. You can look this up. So yeah, he trusted his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law took his money. So that's ingenuousness. That's why I'm not necessarily saying belief is a good thing, see? Because he trusted him and he got screwed. This is an old story. How many great artists and athletes have been taken for a ride by people who had managed their money? And Bernie Madoff is probably the most famous example like that. People had trust in him. It's not like the guy didn't know anything. He knew a lot. He knew a lot about investing and the markets and things. He was just a crook. He wound up in prison. And a lot of people lost a lot of money.
So on one hand, at this level, there can be openness that can allow for growth, learning, and alignment while still providing a sense of grounding. But there may be some vulnerability to persuasion, especially from authoritative sources or authority bias.
Yeah, like something that happened to me. I had many women told me they loved me. And I realized later that was just a story. That was just a scam. They just wanted to get into my pants. Okay. I was being ingenuous, but it was motivated by the fact that I wanted it to be true. They wanted it to be true. This thing is being told them. They're not maintaining neutrality. So your own intention or impulse gets mixed up in this. You can have faith in people who you shouldn't have faith in. Later on in life, when I was a lot smarter and a lot wiser, and thousands of hours of meditation later, I came to realize they didn't love me. They just want to get into my pants. By then, it was patently obvious. But when I was young, I was ingenuous. So I believed them. Maybe if I had been skeptical of them, I wouldn't have accepted it. But I had my own emotional reasons for wanting to think what they were telling me was true. And this goes on all the time on the internet. It's the most crooked place ever devised by the human mind. I don't know, 10, 20, 30 scams a day of one kind or another coming through. Because as a public figure, my email address is on my website. Anybody can contact me. I want to maintain neutrality and be impartial and look at the facts. And I've learned how to do that. So I can see these people coming now because I have a lot more knowledge that I can rely on. I don't have to believe them because I have knowledge. There is a certain profile for women on the internet who run a scam on men to get money. It's a whole cottage industry. It's like an established business. Like when you go to a dentist, he has 100 different things he does, and you expect him to do those things because you know what dentists are like. Once you know what they're doing and how they act, it's not hard to figure out. They have this right there. They say this and this, It's a scam. And they're not really smart enough to think up a novel scam. They run the same scam as all the other people like that who are running a scam. So that's the internet. Anyway, above ingenuousness is confidence. You have confidence in somebody, a manager of a sports team. He has confidence in his players. He has great faith. He knows if I send these guys out there, they know what they're doing. They have been trained. They're conditioned. I have confidence in them. They may not win the game, but still, as opposed to a guy with a lot of players who are not too bright, who don't really know what they're doing, he sends them out there. With his basketball, he's got to send 5 guys out there. With his baseball, he's got to send 9 guys out. He might not have that faith in them. But when you find a championship team, the players have confidence in themselves. They have confidence in one another. They have confidence in the manager and the coaches. There's a lot of confidence there. It becomes a kind of belief. Some people say that the 1998 Yankees were the greatest baseball team of all time. Okay, they won 125 games. And I don't think anybody's ever won that much in a season. They were just awesome. And one of their top players has often said, every day when we went out there, we thought we were going to win. And if we didn't win, we just said, we'll get them tomorrow. That's what you get on a team like that just rolls over the opposition. They lose occasionally.
There's a high neurological and physiological impact because high confidence stimulates the production of testosterone and other hormones associated with assertiveness and risk-taking behavior. Yes. It all activates part of the brain to do with self-regulation, emotional control, and decision-making. It's really interesting when you look at these levels and you look at how it affects you neurologically, psychologically, and physiologically. There's such a tie-in with everything that you're talking about. We can see, talking about the teams, the base of the Yankees, you can see that if you've got a high level of confidence, that's going to bolster your self-esteem and motivation and persistence in the face of challenges, but also it can inspire confidence in others. There's a sort of a ripple effect. The shadow side of that is overconfidence.
Right.
Which can go down that greasy pole of development where that leads to poor decision-making and dismissal of valid concerns or overconfidence bias.
That's what hubris is. So then at the top of the scale is a belief where you have complete faith in something. A guy has been following a certain political person. He's listened to him 500 times. He knows his policies. He knows his background. He knows his philosophy. He doesn't need to hear any more from that guy. He knows, I'm voting for this guy. I'm convinced. And I heard a pollster recently talking about the American electorate and the election coming. And he says that actually several different top experts, I've heard say the same thing very recently within the last week. The American people have made up their minds. So you have a large number of people who are going to vote for Trump. You have a large number of people who are going to vote for Biden. Doesn't matter what you say. It's not going to change it. Facts are not going to change it. There's this tiny little shred of people in between, maybe 5%. This is unusual, by the way, to have this 5 months ahead of an election to have this. There's maybe 5% of the people who are still trying to figure this out or make up their minds. A lot of those people are people who just don't have a clue. I make a point in the scale of politics that level 4 is centrist, that there are very few actual centrists. A lot of people call themselves centrists. They're actually not centrists. Most of the people who are centrists are people who don't have a clue. Say, who are you voting for? There's an election going on? Yeah. There's this candidate and this candidate. Oh, yeah, I never heard of those guys. See, that guy's a centrist. He doesn't have a clue. That's why he's a centrist. Because centrism is, we're talking about it at another scale here, but it generally suggests ignorance. So anyway, that's the scale of belief. As you said, there's a lot in this. The safest position is to be at neutrality. And tyrants of any type are people who are at one extreme or another extreme. Hitler had complete faith in the German people. The Germans were the superior race, the master race, is the terminology. That was his belief. So if you try to talk to him about the advantages of democracy, he has no faith in that. He has no trust in that, complete disbelief. So there's a correspondence there, where a person who has belief also has disbelief. And it's frustrating to have a conversation with people at either end of the spectrum, because it's basically a waste of time, because facts are irrelevant. There are people who are allergic to facts. So I guess that's about it for today. I want to invite your listeners to my website, which is septemics.com, where you can get a lot of interesting data, find out all about this subject. There's probably more data there than you even want to see, but it's all free, so have fun.
This has been fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much. When you look at this scale, it can profoundly shape our psychological experiences and neurological activity and
Yes.
physiological functioning in an integrated way. Finding the appropriate level for a given situation allows us to optimize cognitive resources, regulate emotional and physical responses, and adapt our frames as needed. Rigid extremes can be maladaptive.
They are maladaptive.
Yeah, but balanced contextual regulation may be the key to holistic well-being or an integrated well-being.
On the other hand, you're never going to fall in love with anybody unless you go up the scale. You have to believe in your girl or your man or whatever it is. That's what happy marriages are built on. There's trust, there's control, there's belief. That's what that's about. And if you make a mistake, it costs you $100,000 in divorce court. Have a great week.
You too, Jim.